Have you ever found yourself sitting in a darkened movie theater, maybe mid-July, watching just a massive multi-million-dollar explosion on screen and realize that this single movie is somehow inextricably tied to the fast food meal you ate yesterday?
Oh, and the pop song playing on your radio on the drive over?
Yes, exactly. And like the T-shirt you just saw someone wearing out in the lobby, I mean, you are living in a highly engineered ecosystem. And on this custom-tailored deep dive, we're going to explore exactly how that happened. I am your host, and I'm so excited to get into this.
And I'm thrilled to be here to unpack it all with you.
So today we're looking at excerpts from this incredibly dense, fascinating academic text on film history. Specifically, it covers American cinema and the entertainment economy in the 1980s and 1990s. And our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how the modern pop culture landscape, the one you interact with every single day, was born from this perfect storm of new home technology, corporate mega mergers, and a sudden obsession with teenage audiences.
It really is just a remarkable period of transition. And the source text actually sets the stage for this by linking the era's cinema directly to the political climate of the time, which I find super interesting.
All right, the political backdrop.
Yeah, it notes that the 1980s under Ronald Reagan represented a new right agenda, so a return to this sort of patriotic know-how. And Reagan himself was literally an ex-movie star who would quote Warner Brothers movie lines in his political speeches.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. And his massive defense initiative was popularly nicknamed Spar Wars. But then the text contrasts that with the 1990s under Bill Clinton, who eagerly embraced the liberal Hollywood elite. I mean, he was throwing these sax-playing inaugural balls filled with celebrities.
And just as a quick aside to you, our listener, because this is important,
Yeah.
we're strictly looking at this through the lens of film history and business.
Mhm.
We are not taking any political sides here whatsoever.
Absolutely not.
We're just impartially reporting the source material's assertion here, which is that Hollywood and Washington were essentially borrowing each other's playbooks during this specific era. The political theater and the movie theater were just deeply, inextricably intertwined.
Right, they were feeding off each other. But the political backdrop really is simply the soil from which this massive entertainment economy grew. To understand the actual mechanics of that economy, we have to look at the hardware.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to truly understand the business of the 80s and 90s, we have to start with the technological earthquake that kicked the whole thing off.
The VCR.
Exactly, the VCR. You simply cannot understand the modern blockbuster
Mm.
without understanding that clunky rectangular box sitting under a television set.
It's the inciting incident of this entire era. So in 1976, Sony and Matsushita introduced the Betamax and the VHS formats to the consumer market. And, Hollywood's initial reaction wasn't excitement at all.
No, it was sheer, unadulterated terror. They hated it.
Oh, completely.
The text points out that major players, specifically MCA and Disney, they actually sued to stop the sale of VCRs entirely. They went to court claiming that the very existence of a video recorder was copyright infringement.
Well, you have to view it from the perspective of a studio executive in 1976, right? For nearly a century, Hollywood had complete iron-fisted control over how and when you watched a movie. You paid for a ticket, you sat in their theater, and when it was over, it was gone.
Like, you couldn't take it with you.
Exactly. So the idea that a consumer could just tape something at home, own it forever, and replay it for free, they genuinely believed it would destroy the theatrical exhibition business overnight.
Which is, I mean, it's exactly like the music industry 20 years later, initially trying to destroy digital downloads and MP3s.
Oh, that's a perfect comparison.
Right. They fought it tooth and nail, dragging people to court, only to eventually realize that digital streaming would become their absolute biggest cash cow. And Hollywood lost that VCR lawsuit, but it turned out to be the greatest financial blessing in their history. By 1988, nearly 60 million U.S. households had VCRs.
What's fascinating here is that the VCR didn't cannibalize theaters like they feared. It created an entirely new, highly lucrative ancillary market.
It's basically found money at that point.
Exactly. Think about the studio vaults. Suddenly, this massive library of old films wasn't just gathering dust. They could put them on tape and monetize their entire history all over again. Film libraries became infinitely more valuable.
But the real game changer that the sources highlight is the sell-through strategy. Because initially, a VHS tape was incredibly expensive, often like $80 to $100.
Yeah, they were priced almost exclusively for rental stores like Blockbuster.
Right, so the studio made money on that initial sale to the store, but they didn't see a single dime of the late fees or the rental fees after that.
Which is why Paramount decided to completely change the math. They slashed the price of selected tapes to roughly $40.
Which was still a decent chunk of change back then, but it crossed a psychological threshold. It was cheap enough for a massive fan to say, I want to own this. And Top Gun is the ultimate example here.
Oh, absolutely.
It hits theaters in 1986. It's a massive hit. But a year later, the videocassette makes an astonishing $40 million in sales in a single week.
Half of what the film had earned in its entire months-long theatrical run.
In 7 days.
Generated in 7 days of video sales, yes. The profit margins were staggering. Soon, video income was generating twice the revenue of theatrical releases across the board.
Wow.
And the technology just kept refining itself to capture more money. By 1997, the DVD arrived.
Which was a massive leap.
Huge. It was vastly cheaper to manufacture than a magnetic tape, it was harder to pirate, and you could load it with bonus features to incentivize purchasing. The source text mentions how the Shrek DVD had, 11 hours of extra material, games, and voiceover options. The DVD became the most swiftly adapted consumer electronics appliance in U.S. history.
So because of the VCR and the DVD, movies are suddenly generating billions with a B in these new home video markets. And because there is blood in the water, massive global corporations outside of traditional Hollywood look at the studios and realize they need a piece of that action.
Yes, this is the birth of the conglomerate era. In the late 80s and 90s, the classic major studios were systematically swallowed up by massive multinational corporations.
Just bought up one by one.
Right. News Corporation bought Fox, Sony bought Columbia, Time merged with Warner, Viacom bought Paramount. And these weren't just random corporate takeovers by rich guys. The goal was a very specific structural shift driven by a single buzzword.
Synergy.
Synergy.
It really is the holy grail of the 80s boardroom. But, what does that actually mean for the movies themselves?
Well, synergy is the coordination of several compatible business lines to maximize income. Under a conglomerate, a movie was no longer just a 2-hour narrative experience.
It was a product launch.
Exactly. A movie was content. It was the engine that drove every other division of the corporation. If Time Warner makes a Batman movie, Warner Brothers gets the box office, Time Magazine runs the cover story, Warner Music sells the Prince soundtrack, and DC Comics sells the graphic novels. The movie feeds the entire corporate ecosystem.
And to fuel that massive corporate synergy machine, the studios relied on what the text calls the megapic, or the tentpole. These are the wildly expensive, star-studded, special effects-heavy event movies.
The ones you felt socially obligated to see, yeah.
Right, or you just wouldn't be able to participate in water cooler conversations. And the studios realized that the demographic driving this engine was incredibly specific. 12 to 29-year-olds. They made up 75% of the movie-going public.
Because that demographic is the most susceptible to repeat viewing, merchandise purchasing, and soundtrack buying. But to reach that global, youthful audience, the core ideas had to be incredibly digestible.
Right, they couldn't be overly complicated.
No, this is the era of the high-concept movie. Executives didn't want to hear about complex character arcs or subtle thematic nuances. They wanted a pitch in 25 words or less.
The classic example the source provides is Speed.
Yes. It was successfully pitched and greenlit simply as Die Hard on a Bus.
Okay, wait, I need to stop you there and push back on the strategy a bit. Because the text mentions that these megapics were wildly expensive. I mean, average cost hit $60 million, and Titanic hit a rumored $200 million.
Oh, they were astronomical.
But at the same time, we know that historically, something like 60% of all films are financial disasters. If the vast majority of movies lose money, why didn't the studios just mitigate their risk and make cheaper movies? Betting the entire corporate farm on a $100 million explosion just seems like terrible business.
It seems completely counterintuitive if you're looking at traditional risk management, for sure. But the financial math of the era had fundamentally changed. The ceiling for profits had completely vanished.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, movies like Star Wars and Jaws in the late 70s proved that a single film could make hundreds of millions of dollars globally. One massive hit in E.T. or Jurassic Park generated so much capital that it literally paid for a decade's worth of flops.
So it's a lottery ticket model.
Exactly. And more importantly, a modest, well-crafted $10 million character drama simply cannot feed the corporate synergy machine. A quiet drama doesn't sell action figures, it doesn't spawn a roller coaster at Universal Studios, and it doesn't sell Happy Meals. The megapic does.
Okay, so the financial risk is terrifyingly high, but the potential reward is global corporate dominance. And because studios are putting so much money on the line for these mega picks, they had to invent new ways to guarantee success, or at least,
Yeah.
offset those massive costs before the cameras even rolled.
Which fundamentally shifted the balance of power in Hollywood. Because the studios were desperate for insurance policies on these massive investments, power consolidated around the talent agent.
Rise of the super agent.
Right. Agencies like CAA, led by Michael Ovitz, became the true kings of the industry. Instead of a studio finding a script and then slowly hiring a director and then auditioning actors,
Okay.
Ovitz would walk into a studio executive's office with a package.
You meaning he had the script, the director, and the star already locked in?
Right. He would walk in and say, I have the new script from this hot writer, I have Sidney Pollack to direct, and I have Tom Cruise to star. They only work together. You have to buy the whole package right now for a premium, or I'm walking across the street to Warner Brothers, and they will buy it.
Oh.
It completely stripped the studios of their creative development control, but it gave them the guaranteed megapick they craved.
And because the studios were so desperate for those bankable stars to ensure an opening weekend crowd, star salaries absolutely skyrocketed. We see the birth of the $20 million club. Tom Cruise, Julia Roberts, Jim Carrey, they were demanding and getting $20 million up front per picture.
But that creates a new problem. If you're paying your lead actor $20 million, you are deeply in the red before you even build a set.
Yeah, the budget is already bloated.
Exactly. So to offset those costs, studios got incredibly aggressive with product placement. It went from subtle set dressing to blatant advertising. James Bond wasn't just driving a cool spy car. The script was specifically engineered so he was exclusively driving a new BMW.
Or, in Back to the Future, where an entire comedic sequence revolves around Marty McFly struggling to open a bottle of Pepsi in the 1950s. I mean, companies were paying tens of millions of dollars for that screen time.
And beyond the screen, they needed massive free marketing mechanisms. Enter the fast food tie-in. McDonald's Happy Meals became promotional juggernauts for Disney cartoons.
Oh, man, I remember those.
We all do. And we can't overstate the impact of MTV. Music videos became relentless, totally free commercials for the films. A music video like Ray Parker Jr.'s Ghostbusters theme was essentially a 3-minute trailer running on loop in the living rooms of millions of teenagers.
Even the physical architecture of theaters had to change to support this business model, right?
Yeah.
We see the rise of the megaplex theaters with 16, 20, sometimes 24 screens. Why? Because if you have a massive megapic that might actually be terrible, you need to open it on 3,000 screens on the exact same Friday, scoop up all the box office money from your massive advertising blitz before bad word of mouth can spread by Monday morning.
It was a brilliantly ruthless optimization of the theatrical window.
So what does this all mean? We've talked about agents leveraging packages, McDonald's Happy Meals, BMW product placement, and corporate synergy. But did this highly corporate, focus-grouped business model fundamentally change the actual art of making movies? Did it change the visual language of what we physically see on the screen?
It absolutely did. The business completely dictated the aesthetics. Because remember where we started? The VCR.
Right.
The studios knew that while a movie might play in a theater for a few weeks, it was ultimately going to be watched and generate the most profit on a low-resolution 1980s television set in a brightly lit living room. That final viewing environment altered everything. It led to a stylistic shift film scholars call intensified continuity.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because you wouldn't necessarily think a VCR sitting in a living room dictates how a director on a soundstage points a camera.
Well, think about the actual technology of a standard definition TV in the 80s and 90s. It was a bulky CRT monitor with terrible resolution. If a director shot a beautiful, wide, sweeping master shot where two actors are talking in a massive room, by the time that image is compressed onto a VHS tape and played on a 19-inch Zenith television, those actors are just blurry smudges.
Oh, wow. You literally cannot read the emotion on their faces.
Exactly. So they had to adapt the framing. The source text mentions a highly technical reason for this, the video assist monitor. Directors and editors started watching the scenes unfold on these tiny little TV screens right there on set. The editors knew that if they couldn't clearly see the actor's eyes on that tiny on-set monitor, the audience wouldn't see it on VHS.
Which completely changed how actors were blocked on set. Directors moved away from having actors fluidly walk around a complex set. Instead, they relied heavily on what's called stand-and-deliver staging. They just pushed the camera closer and closer, shooting incredibly tight close-ups of the actors' faces.
Exactly.
It's exactly like how modern pop songs are mixed today.
Yeah. Oh, how so?
If you talk to a music producer, they aren't mixing the bass and the vocals to sound perfect on a $20,000 high-end multi-channel stereo system. They are mixing the songs specifically to sound punchy and loud on a pair of AirPods or a smartphone speaker, because they know that's where 90% of the audience will actually experience the art. The final consumption environment dictates the creation itself.
That's a brilliant analogy, and it maps perfectly onto 90s cinema. And the aesthetic shifts didn't stop at framing. When actors did need to move, directors didn't cut out to wide shots. They used Steadicams. They employed walk-and-talk staging, tightly following the actors down a corridor.
Keeping the energy up.
Yes, it kept the image dynamic without ever losing that crucial close-up. And maybe the most jarring change was the editing. The pace of cutting exploded.
The numbers in the text are wild. Before 1960, an average shot in a Hollywood movie lasted about 8 to 11 seconds. You had time to absorb the frame. But by the late 80s and 90s, action films like Michael Bay's Armageddon or The Crow were averaging 2 to 3 seconds per shot. It's just a relentless barrage of imagery.
And that, too, was a direct response to the home viewing environment. It was a defense mechanism against the greatest threat to a home video, the TV remote control.
Oh, of course.
When you're in a theater, you're a captive audience. When you're at home, you have the power to just change the channel, fast forward, or get up and go to the kitchen. Directors realized they had to keep the visual stimulation artificially high. They were constantly refreshing the image every 2 seconds so your brain wouldn't get bored and your thumb wouldn't hit the channel button.
So if we look at the landscape at this point, we have a major studio system completely obsessed with 12 to 29-year-olds, rapid-fire editing, special effects, and corporate synergy. That hyper-focus has to leave a massive cultural vacuum for anyone over the age of 30 or anyone who just wants a different kind of movie.
It absolutely created a massive vacuum, and that cultural empty space paved the way for two very distinct types of creators to emerge during this era: the blockbuster auteur and the indie rebel.
Let's talk about the blockbuster auteurs first, because these are the directors who didn't fight the megapic system. They thrived in it. James Cameron is the absolute poster child here. He directs The Terminator, Titanic. He proved you could take the massive budgets, the physical action, the cutting-edge CGI, and still maintain a deeply resonant emotional core that audiences genuinely cared about.
Robert Zemeckis is another perfect example of the blockbuster auteur. He expertly blended groundbreaking visual technology and heartfelt storytelling in films like Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Forrest Gump.
Right.
These directors were incredibly rare. They were able to take the corporate demand for a synergistic event movie and somehow infuse it with a distinct personal artistic vision.
But then, completely on the other end of the spectrum, you have the independents. And the beautiful, almost poetic irony here is that the exact same home video boom that funded the giant corporate megapics is the exact mechanism that allowed independent film to explode.
Because the local video rental stores needed inventory, they couldn't just stock 50 copies of Top Gun. They needed shelves full of different titles to keep people coming back. This hunger for content democratized the financing of movies through something called video pre-sales.
Explain how that mechanism actually worked for an indie filmmaker.
So say you're an unknown filmmaker. You have a script. You could take that script to an independent video distributor in Europe, and they would guarantee you, say, $50,000 for the VHS rights in Germany. You take that signed contract to a bank, they loan you the cash, and you go shoot your movie. You bypass the Hollywood studio system entirely.
Which is how a film like Jim Jarmusch's Stranger Than Paradise gets made. It is a grainy, black and white, ultra-low-budget movie that completely rejects the Spielberg-Lucas blockbuster model,
Yeah.
and yet it becomes a massive, highly profitable hit.
And as this independent scene grew, the Sundance Film Festival became its epicenter. Robert Redford takes it over, and it transforms from a quiet regional festival into the ultimate scouting ground for Hollywood.
It became huge.
Yeah, the undeniable turning point is 1989, with Steven Soderbergh's movie Sex, Lies, and Videotape. It's a cheap, dialogue-heavy adult drama. It wins Sundance, gets picked up, and goes on to gross nearly $100 million worldwide.
Suddenly, independent film isn't just a niche art project, it's a highly lucrative brand. You see the rapid rise of many major studios like New Line Cinema and Miramax, who swoop in, buy a movie like Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, and market it into a massive cultural phenomenon.
And they achieved these massive returns with a fraction of the budget of a typical megapicket. It proved definitively that the major studios were leaving money on the table. There was a massive, underserved adult audience out there hungry for complex, edgy, non-synergized storytelling.
Wait, didn't we establish earlier that the global conglomerates were buying up absolutely everything in their path? If these mini-majors were suddenly making hundreds of millions of dollars, did the indie rebellion actually survive, or did the corporate empire just strike back?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the ultimate irony of the 1990s indie boom is that the conglomerates didn't destroy the rebellion. They simply bought it.
Of course they did.
Yeah, the major studios realized they didn't need to fundamentally change their highly profitable megapic strategy to capture that edgy adult market. They
Right.
could just own the independent distributors.
Out of the competition.
Exactly. Disney bought Miramax. Time Warner bought New Line Cinema. They effectively brought the indie movement in-house, operating them as prestige labels to win Oscars and serve as minor league scouting grounds for new directors that they could eventually hand a megapic franchise to.
Wow. So to bring it all home to you, our listener, the next time you buy a ticket and sit down in a massive stadium seating megaplex, or the next time you watch an action scene that cuts every 2 seconds so you don't reach for your phone, or you see a fast food tie-in promoting a superhero movie, you will know exactly the structural history of how it got there.
Yeah.
You are living, right now, in the entertainment ecosystem built by the VCR and the 1980s corporate synergy machine.
Which really makes you wonder about the future of this medium.
Yeah, where does it go from here?
Right. Because if the introduction of the VCR, which was a relatively simple piece of home electronics, could entirely rewrite the aesthetic rules of cinema, dictate the length of a single camera shot, and force global corporations to merge, what will happen to the fundamental DNA of storytelling as we enter the era of artificial intelligence and fully immersive virtual realities? Will the megapic, as we know it, even survive the next technological earthquake?
That is a brilliant question, and something fascinating for you to chew on the next time you're sitting in the dark eating a handful of popcorn. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep questioning the media you consume, and as always, stay curious.